Okay. You guys should know this, so I don't want to go over it. But the main thing is that there's two main categories of the different organs. One is the alimentary canal. The alimentary canal is a continuous tube from your oral cavity all the way to your anus. Okay, and while the accessory digestive organs, they will end up helping with the digestion of the food. Different functions, you guys already know these. The main ones that I want to talk about are the mechanical digestion and the chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion is a physical breakdown, so you're physically breaking food down into smaller and smaller pieces. While the chemical digestion, this is the utilizing enzymes to break it down chemically, so breaking bonds basically. Okay, so that's a chemical digestion. And these are different types of mechanical digestion that you'll need to know. The thing that you might not know too much is segmentation. What segmentation is, remember how, for those of you who have lab already, we have an inner circular muscularis externa. And that inner circular layer, when it contracts, it's going to close it off, right? So if you have a tube that's a long tube here, and when you contract over here, anything that's within this area is going to move on either side of that tube, right? Same thing if I contract this circular muscularis externa, it's going to move whatever contents in there. So if I end up contracting here, it's going to move it here. If contracted, it's going to move it there, and so on and so forth. And then that's what segmentation is. You're going to just basically be mixing it up within the lumen of the small intestine here. So here, it will just contract, or it contracts over here. So it's just going to be moving the food particle and mixing it up within the small intestine in this case scenario, okay? So that's a segmentation. Peristalsis, on the other hand, is a little bit different, okay? So we have an inner circular layer that's going to contract behind the food, okay? And then there's a longitudinal muscle, the muscularis externa, that's going to push it forwards, okay? So you notice how it pushes it forwards this way. And the analogy I gave you guys was like when you guys put toothpaste on your toothbrush, right? So not only do you push it down like the circular layers does, you're going to push it forwards to get the toothpaste out onto your toothbrush, and that's the longitudinal layers that will end up pushing it forwards, okay? So that's peristalsis. All right, so let's go on further here. No, gastrointestinal tract is only at the stomach and intestines. Alimentary canal, I think it's just the digestive tract. Mm-hmm. Hey, the layers of the digestive tract, we have the top layer that's closest to the lumen. Okay, remember lumen, what is the lumen? It's the space within hollow organs, right? In this case, it's going to be right here, right? The lumen will be right in there. Let me just redo that. Okay, and there's 3 layers of it, and we'll talk about it in just a second. So the closest one to the lumen is the mucosa layer. Just like the mucosa layer, then when we talk about the trachea. Underneath it will be the submucosa. And underneath that, we have the muscularis externa. And those are the 2 muscles that we just talked about in regards to peristalsis or segmentation. Okay. And then we have the final layer is the serosa. The serosa is the basically the visceral pericardium. Okay, so this is the same thing as the visceral peritoneum. Did I say cardium? Peritoneum. What is the visceral pericardium? Around the heart, also known as what? The epicardium, right? Mm-hmm. What is it around the lungs? Pleura. Pleura. So this is the visceral peritoneum. It has two layers, right? We have the areolar connective tissue and what's the other tissue? Simple squamous epithelium. Okay, in this case they call it mesothelium, but it's basically simple squamous epithelium. That's only for certain types of digestive organs, because not all digestive organs will have the serosa. There's those digestive organs that are either behind the serosa or behind the peritoneum, and so they will end up having something called adventitia. And adventitia is just connective tissue that will end up, connective tissue that will end up attaching it to other organs nearby. Okay. Correct. Some of the will have adventitia instead. All right. Let's go on. Onwards to the mucosa. Okay. Once again, the mucosa is the closest layer to the lumen. And it's going to be where the location where the food, bolus, chyme, or feces is going to be traveling through. Okay. It's called food when we're ingesting the food particles. It becomes a bolus when it's mixed with saliva. Okay, so usually in which cavity? Oral cavity. Okay. It becomes chyme when it's mixed with the gastric juices. Okay. It becomes feces after we are done absorbing most of the nutrients from it. So this is usually in the large intestine. So once again, we have the epithelium. Depending on where we are on the digestive tract, they have different types of epithelium. Some of them is going to be simple columnar epithelium. But then there are others that's going to be stratified squamous epithelium. Okay. In the stratified squamous epithelium, what is its function again? To prevent, protection from friction, right? Because when something very dry is rubbing against anything, it's going to cause a lot of friction, abrasion. So having multiple layers will end up protecting the bottom cells underneath it. Good. All right, so let's go on with the lamina propria. Okay, the lamina propria is loose connective tissue, and that loose connective tissue will have a lot of structures within it. And underneath that, we have the muscularis mucosae. Okay, muscularis mucosae, they have these grooves and ridges that increase the surface area for more contact with the food. Okay, and so that's all part of the mucosa. And you see this on this picture here. It's a little bit hard to see, but the very outer layer part is the epithelium. Then majority of this is going to be the lamina propria, and then a small layer that's going to be the muscularis mucosae. Okay. And we know that the mucosa has these lymphatic tissue in it, and that's what makes it the mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. Okay. So because of the food that we're ingesting, they might contain a lot of pathogens inside of it. We have the malts here to help combat that. So the one model that you guys have looks something like this. So once again, when we look at this, we could see that everything from here all the way to here is the mucosa layer, right? And then this is all what? Simple columnar epithelium. What is most of this here? lamina propria, okay. And then just this layer here, this smooth muscle layer here, muscularis mucosae, okay. Good. What's underneath the mucosa? The submucosa. Okay, so that's what we're going to go into next. The submucosa, there's a lot of loose connective tissue with blood vessels, nerves, and also lymphatic tissue as well. And then there's certain structures that might occur in here that we'll take a look at in a second. But of course, there is molt still at this location, even though it's called mucosa associated. It is found in the submucosa, and more particularly in the ileum. What kind of structures do we have that forms this molt? The Peyer's patches, right? The aggregated lymphoid nodules, which is shown over here. This is a Peyer's patch here. Okay, also known as an aggregated lymphoid nodule. The muscularis externa, there's typically two smooth muscle layers because it depends on where we're located at it. Sometimes there's going to be not smooth muscles, it's going to be skeletal muscles. Other locations, there's like three layers, so on and so forth. And then large intestine, we have like a minimized secondary muscularis externa longitudinal layer. Okay, so we have the inner circular layer of the muscularis externa, and that's this particular layer. The inner, it's called inner because it's closer to the mucosa, which is close to the lumen, right? Okay, so this inner circular layer, it's circular, so what do circular muscles do? They close, right? When they contract, right? They close it off. So we're going to prevent backflow of food and also segmentation as well, right? So this is also going to cause that segmentation to occur. Okay, so some of them will form sphincters. Sphincters, once again, are circular muscles that will end up preventing food from, or regulating food from going through one part of the digestive tract to the next, okay? So like the pyloric sphincter, it will regulate the amount of food going from the stomach to the small intestine, the duodenum, okay? And so those are the sphincters that regulate the amount of food that goes. The longitudinal, outer longitudinal layer is the next layer here. The outer longitudinal layer is going to be this little bit more superficial, and this outer longitudinal layer is going to be moving the food forwards, okay? So in our analogy when we were talking about the toothpaste, right? The circular layer is the one that's going to squeeze down on the toothpaste, and then the longitudinal layer is like as if you're pushing it forward so that the toothpaste will come out, okay? So over here, this here is the muscularis externa, but specifically this part here is the inner circular layer. This is the outer longitudinal layer of the muscularis externa. Okay. Okay, serosa or adventitia. Like I said earlier, some parts will, most of it is going to be serosa, but there are parts that's going to be having adventitia. So the outermost layer for most of our digestive tract, from the lower esophagus, notice how it says lower esophagus because the upper esophagus will have the adventitia instead, and all the way to the intestines prior to the rectum. Okay, this is all part of the visceral peritoneum. They're synonymous with each other. Okay, once again, what is it made out of? Areolar connective tissue and simple squamous epithelium, right, which is called the mesothelium. Okay, very good. And you see it on this picture here, shown as just this outer layer part here. It is or adventitia because not every part of the digestive tract will have the serosa. A lot of it will have It's not a lot, but there's some parts of it that will have adventitia, like outside of our pharynx. Most of the esophagus, usually the upper portion, the rectum. Okay, so this will have connective tissue that will end up blending with the connective tissue of surrounding organs. So the adventitia, in this angle you can't see it, but it will be down here on the very bottom side here. Okay, but you don't see it from this angle. You have to kind of tilt it in order to see it. Dense bodies, they are very similar to Z discs of the skeletal muscles, where the myofilaments will attach to. Okay, so you guys should have already read this. I'm not going to go over it too much. We've already talked about single unit versus multi-unit, right? What's the difference between the two? Single unit, they have what between the cells? Gap junctions, right? They have gap junctions. So when it contracts as one organ or at the same time. While the multi-unit, they have multiple neuromuscular junctions. Enteric nervous system, this is a review as well, because this is once again the nervous system that will regulate how the stomach will undergo peristalsis and the amount of enzymes that will end up putting into the digestive tract. Okay, so there are two plexuses that you need to know. Is a submucosa plexus, like the name implies. Where are you going to find this plexus? In the submucosa layer, right? Okay, and this will end up regulating the muscularis mucosae. Okay, this will control that. While the myenteric plexus is going to be in between the intercircular layer and the outer longitudinal layer. Okay, and this is for peristalsis purposes. And you see these here, right? The yellow structures that you see here. Okay, this is the which one? Submucosa plexus. While this one here, that innervates this part, and here is the myenteric plexus. Very good. Peritoneum, I'm not going to go over this. We went over it a few times already. The only thing I want to emphasize is what retroperitoneum means. Retro means, yeah, behind, or back. Okay, so retroperitoneum means behind the peritoneum. So there are certain organs that are behind it, and you'll notice them over here. There's the pancreas, there's the duodenum, the urinary bladder, parts of the large intestine, the rectum, more particular, so on and so forth. Mesentery, you guys should already know these as well. So the mesentery are peritoneum. Once again, they don't. They connect one organ to another. Okay, so they are made of both the visceral and parietal, sometimes peritoneal. And then you need to know these different ones and what they connect to. Okay, so the only thing about this is that some of them we learned about this one and this one in lab. But then there are other ones that you need to know. We do talk about the falciform ligament in the lab. There's a lesser omentum, which connects the lesser curvature, which is the stomach part over here, to the liver here. So this is the lesser omentum. Then there's the transverse mesocolon. The transverse mesocolon will connect the transverse colon to the posterior side of the abdominal wall. Okay, and you do see that here on this model here. Okay, and that's the transverse mesocolon. And then there's the sigmoid mesocolon that will suspend the sigmoid colon back here to the posterior wall. And I was hoping that you could see it over here. It's not that clear. So, yeah, it's not shown on this model there. What is this here, though? For those of you at lab. It's the mesentery, or mesentery proper. And what is this over here? The greater omentum, right? And what's this over here? Falciform ligament. Okay, great. Okay, let's talk about the oral cavity, okay, which is the mouth. Okay, And oral cavity here has the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Once again, why? Why does it have the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium? Yeah, to prevent abrasion from occurring. I mean, because there's going to be abrasion, it protects the cells underneath it. Okay, so it's surrounded by the labia, which are the lips. Okay, the lips are called the labia. Bucci, which are the cheeks. The palate, there's two regions of the palate, right? There's this part, which is the hard palate, and then there's the soft palate back here. The hard palate is made up of maxillary bone and the palatine bone, right? And you guys, if you guys remember the specific, the maxillary bone, there's no eating. Palatine bone maxillary bone has the palatine process, and then the horizontal plate of the palatine bone will make up the hard palate. So some of the functions of the oral cavity, one is ingestion of food, right? You're putting food into your oral cavity. Another is for taste and touch sensation. Okay, we remember the taste and touch part of the which cranial nerve? 7 for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, right? Glossopharyngeal for the posterior 1/3, and okay, so for the pharynx and stuff, right? Okay, also for mastication, okay, pronounce it correctly, for chewing purposes, okay. So this is a type of mechanical digestion. So when you're going through the alimentary canal, you want to be thinking of what is mechanical, what is chemical, and what is occurring in these locations here. Okay. At the same time, there's going to be some chemical digestion using salivary enzymes. Okay, these salivary enzymes are going to be produced by the salivary glands, and these type of chemical digestions that we'll talk about is one is going to be digestion of carbohydrates. The other one is going to be lipids, but it doesn't really occur in the oral cavity, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Deglutition is the fancy way of saying swallowing, but you do need to know what deglutition is. Okay, and then we have speech as well as part of the oral cavity. Of course, there could be air passing through here. It's not the only location where air will pass through, but you could end up breathing through your mouth if you wish to, because it ends up going to the oral pharynx, right? So once again, the labia is made up of this thin, keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. It's very thin. That's why it tends to have a more reddish tone in color because of the blood vessels underneath that we can actually see. Okay. And then the bucci, once again, are the cheeks, and they hold food in. So without cheeks, then food will be dribbling out your mouth like Two-Face. We have the gingiva. Gingiva is the gums, okay, which covers our alveolar processes of the mandible and the maxilla. Helps support our teeth. The tongue is for gustation or taste purposes, also with our sound production. It helps us with mastication as well. It also will help with deglutition. What's deglutition again? Swallowing, right? And then the very posterior part of the tongue has that lingual tonsil. You guys remember that? Do we have it here today? Or was it? I think I had it earlier on all the way back here. Right, back here, have the lingual tonsil. Okay, the palate is the roof of the oral cavity, and it's going to separate the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. And like we said earlier, there's a hard palate, which is made of the maxillary bone, right? The palatine process of the maxillary bone. And then the horizontal plate of the palatine bone. We have the soft palate. Okay, the soft palate is the posterior part of it. And the posterior part of it, we have the thing that hangs down here is called the uvula, right? And this helps prevent food and water from going into your nasal cavity. Of course, like what we said, when you're talking or laughing and things like that, it doesn't seal that part, and so fluids or food particles potentially will go into your nasal cavity. Fauces is the area right here where it borderlines the oral cavity from the what's behind the oral cavity? Oral pharynx. Salivary glands, they produce saliva. They produce both watery fluids and also a little bit more thick type of fluids. But there's other things like digestive enzyme, mucin, which becomes what again? Mucus. Some electrolytes and defensive secretions as well. Like I said earlier, saliva plus food becomes a bolus, right? The serous acini are the darker staining cells within the salivary glands. These are the ones that's going to be producing the water, the enzymes, the electrolytes, and defensive secretions. So they do it to moisten the fluid so we can actually taste it. Remember how we talked about how what kind of receptor is the taste buds and stuff? Chemoreceptors, right? And it has to have in liquid form to be able to taste it. That's why when you have a dry mouth, or if you end up drying your tongue and stuff, and try to taste things, it's a little bit harder to taste things. It's for chemical digestion because of the enzymes that are involved, and defense for the defensive secretions. So some of the enzymes that you need to know, one is salivary amylase. Amylase will digest amylose. Amylose is just a fancy way of saying starch. Okay, starch is a type of carbohydrate. Okay, what are the 4 biomolecules that you guys talked about way back in the time? Nucleic acids, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, right? Lipids. So this one digests carbohydrates. Okay. There's also something called lingual lipase. Okay. This digests triglycerides. What are triglycerides? Fats. It's a type of lipid. Yeah. Okay. But they are activated at low pH. The pH of the mouth is around neutral. So it's like, I'm trying to remember, 7.6 or something. It's near neutral, okay? But so it's not low pH, okay? Where will it be low pH? In the stomach, right? Acidic, right? And so that's going to be where it's going to be activated. So all you need to know is that lingual lipase will end up being secreted by the serous acini of the salivary glands, and they will be activated at low pH, but they digest triglycerides. The mucus acini tends to be lighter staining, kind of like all the other mucin-producing cells, right? What other mucin-producing cells are lighter staining as well? The goblet cells, right? So the mucus acini, they produce thick mucus, okay, because of the mucin that they end up secreting out. Okay, and once again, the mucus is there to help lubricate the food. It makes sense that we're lubricating the food because the food tends to be really dry and abrasive, right? And so we want to protect our alimentary canal as we're eating the food. The parotid salivary glands are on the lateral sides here. And if you look at it under the histology, you'll notice that most of these cells, if not all of these cells, are darker staining or lighter staining ones. I guess you can't really tell, but they are darker staining cells. So these are serous acini only. It produces 25 to 30% of the saliva. And then the submandibular salivary glands produces the most amount of saliva. Okay, you'll notice that there are the serous acini all over here, and there's the mucus acini over here. Versus the sublingual. Oh, by the way, here's the submandibular. Let me take off some of the. Here are the submandibular glands. Here are the sublingual glands. Lingual meaning your tongue, yeah, so the sublingual glands. Okay, they produce the least amount of saliva. And if you look at it, once again, there's the serous acini, the mucus acini are the lighter staining ones. For these, don't worry about too much about the histology because you're not going to be really tested on it, so don't worry about it. This I think is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to go over this. Okay, certain teeth structures. I guess I want to just quickly go over some of these terms here. When we talk about the pulp cavity, the pulp cavity is the space here, okay? But what's found in this space is the pulp, okay? So the nerves, the blood and lymphatic vessels are going to be found in the pulp cavity here. Okay, and the pulp will also go down these locations here as well, which is the root canal. Okay. The other thing that might be a little bit confusing is that, okay, so we have the enamel here on the crown, and a little bit on the neck portion, but then the outer layer of the root and neck here is called cementum, or cement. Here are the different types of teeth. We have the primary or deciduous teeth. These are our quote-unquote baby teeth. And we have fewer amounts of these, okay? And these are all the temporary teeth. So it only has these teeth over here. Okay, while the secondary or permanent teeth are our adult teeth that will replace the primary teeth. And we have more of them, okay? So some of them stays the same in numbers, like the incisors, they are the same. In the canines, but you'll notice that we have premolars as an adult, and we have a third molar as an adult, which is our wisdom teeth. And for our wisdom teeth, a lot of, because our mouth tends to be a little bit smaller, it tends to be impacted, meaning that the wisdom teeth tends to start growing laterally instead of straight upwards. And when that occurs, we want to get it extracted because if it goes laterally, it's going to affect all the other teeth around it. So that's why a lot of people get their wisdom teeth pulled out. Pharynx, you guys should already know this, right? Okay. But the thing about this is that it's made up of non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Once again, why? Prevent. Yeah, abrasion. Yeah, it's because there's going to be abrasion that's occurring at these locations. We want to make sure that it protects the cells underneath it. Okay, why don't you get out a sheet of paper and do this question here? Okay, you can share the sheet of paper with someone else. Let's go into the esophagus now. Okay, so the esophagus, we undergo a process called peristalsis. Once again, peristalsis, the moving of the food particles down the alimentary canal. At this point in time, it's still going to be non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium to protect it from abrasion. Okay, you'll notice that some of the Musculus externa is going to be skeletal muscle. Others are going to be smooth muscles. The ones that are closer to your pharynx are going to be skeletal muscle. That's why we voluntarily swallow things. While towards the end of it, it's going to be smooth muscles instead. There is a lower esophageal sphincter that you'll need to know. The lower esophageal sphincter, that's called the cardiac sphincter. The cardiac sphincter is a smooth muscle that's really weak, though, and that's why it causes gastric reflux disease. So this gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERDS, is causing heartburn, is because this sphincter is not that strong. So whatever gastric juices that might occur might come up into the esophagus, causing the burning of the esophageal lining. Okay, so this is to prevent food from going up the esophagus. Once again, it's made up of non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium for the mucosa layer. Not to say that's the only thing found in the mucosa. It still has lamina propria. It still has the muscularis mucosae. It's just I'm just being a little bit more specific as what's different from what we said previously. What we said previously is just generalized. What are the different layers of the alimentary canal and so on and so forth. And these are just touching on what's a little bit different from the others. Okay, the submucosa has the esophageal glands. Muscularis externa, like I said earlier, it starts off with skeletal muscle. Then it has both skeletal and smooth muscle. And then we have the lower part, it's the smooth muscle itself. And we said that the esophagus is going to be mostly adventitia. And then towards the stomach, right underneath the diaphragm, it has some serosa around it. And you can see the different layers on this here. If you take a look at it, let me see if I could use a different color here. Okay, so you have from here to here, this is the mucosa layer. What is this space here? Lumen. Okay, so notice what is this here? We said that this was the mucosa, right? Is it simple columnar? Non-keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. Okay, all this is what here? Areolar connective tissue, also known as the lamina propria. This smooth muscle that you see here is the muscularis mucosae, all making part of the mucosa layer, right? What is this layer here? Submucosa. Very good. Okay. Okay. Why don't you guys get out another sheet of paper now? Okay. Yes, this one you'll turn in as well. You can share it. Yeah, you can share it with someone else. Please share it. I don't want to waste too much paper. And what I want you guys to name is what is identify this structure here, or this layer, and then identify just this part here versus just that part there. All right, let me redraw it from here to here. From here to here. Okay, just label that as A, this as B, and this as C.